Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of JagaVision. If you can believe it, we're on episode 5. If you didn't tune in last week, you can totally check out past episodes and last week's episode on our YouTube channel. If you go to the archive section, go to YouTube, click and search for JagaSilk. If you haven't become a subscriber, please consider doing so. If we get to 100 subscribers, then we get to have our own unique URL, which we plan to make youtube.com/jagasilk. For the time being, it's a little bit of garble internet speak that you'll have to check out. So if you click on the JagaSilk logo when you search for JagaSilk in YouTube, you should be able to watch this. Alternatively, you can just go to our website, jagasilk.com, scroll down to the bottom, and there should be some episodes. The most recent episode that has already been recorded there for you to check out, and then you can just go to our YouTube channel from there by clicking on the name JagaSilk. Now, today is the 30th of April. We plan on bringing on some pretty awesome guests. As usual, we will have the wonderful Sister Speak joining us. We've been their tea sponsor for quite some time now, over 6 years. She does some beautiful live performances, tours the world, does a fantastic job with her singer-songwriter career. So we're really happy to have Sherri Anne back on to join us. We also have Josh Hockin from Transcend Coffee. JagaSilk has been supplying Transcend with their teas for a good 5 or 6 years now. So again, pretty excited there. Josh is their director of coffee, and we've known him for, well, since around that time. So we're excited to have him on the show. He's going to join us at 1:15. We're happy to bring these shows to you every week. You want to check them out at 1 p.m. on Thursdays. We live broadcast. If you don't have the chance or the time to tune in, you can always check us out in, again, those archived sections. So today we plan on brewing up some Xiang, a really beautiful dark oolong that we'll get into detail in a little bit. Before that, I figured I would apologize as in one of the first episodes, I was drinking some Margaret's Hope Darjeeling, and I was finding it really uninteresting. But it's because I brewed it wrong. For one, because I thought I was drinking a 2020 selection of samples that had just arrived, and it looks like I can't read, and I was drinking 2019, and that's why it didn't taste amazing. So, yeah, sorry to Margaret's Hope. We kind of unnecessarily bashed your name there, and those were autumnals. So of course I brewed them wrong. I thought I was drinking first flush. And first flush, second flush, and autumnal selections we brew with completely different brewing parameters. You need to kind of heavy dose your autumnals. In my opinion, they're not really that, they don't make a lot of sense because they don't taste amazing, and they don't, and they require a large dose to make them taste memorable and like a little bit memorable. So I generally focus my energy, and I'm biased here, on first and second flushes. First flushes are generally where they're quite light, feature some really young leaf. You're looking at harvest times of like February. It's one of the earliest countries to harvest their new selections in the world. It's kind of like the Beaujolais Nouveau of tea. And so we're excited. We have some Gadapahar Estate first flush 2020 to drink while we're waiting to get our lovely guests on the show. They might just pop in like last week, and I'll be in the middle of drinking, and that's okay. Should just start the show a little earlier, and then I would get to this point sooner. So yeah, hoping to discuss what Transcend's all about, discuss what they're doing in the middle of this COVID-19 crisis, and drink some tea. We have a little bit too much fun. Okay, so see what I'm smelling here. There we go. Okay, that's nicer looking leaves. Way less broken up. Look hand rolled. Yeah, that's great. Here, I'll get them on display here. Gonna need a good 3 grams, I would say. Okay. 3 grams. I like to do about 3 minutes, 15 seconds for my first flush selections. And that's what it's looking like. So some really nice looking leaves. and smell nice and perfumey. Yeah, we're in a good place. So, let's see what I can't do. Got some 80 degrees seawater going, and I'm going to set my timer for 3 minutes 15, and probably going to need tea in there. And we're going to brew up a little bit. And press go the moment the water hits the tea. We should be in a good place. Let you know how that tastes. Probably going to see Josh and Sherri Anne join us in the next minute, so we'll have that brewing in the background. When it's done, I will decant it, give it a little sip. Hey, Sunny. Hi. Can you please bring me down some dark roast Xiang? Thank you. I'm gonna see how we're doing here. A good amount of the thank you very much. Okay. So, if you don't know it, JagaSilk sells our teas in these pouches. This is our dark roast Xiang. You can get this on our web page. Right now, though, I guess the main focus has been on our lighter roast because that's what we brought in the most of, as that was the roast that I was a little bit more excited by. So we'll be putting on the dark roast option after this live stream. So you'll be able to get a package where you can taste both roast profiles for yourself. There we go. Pretty exciting tea, I must say. It smells like chocolate. Always a good thing. Okay, put that up on display there. Should see our friends join us pretty soon. And in the meantime, give me a moment. See what happens. So hope you're staying safe at home, and that we see you guys safe and sound after this is all over. COVID-19, I think, is a really intense challenge for us all. I think that really the best we can hope for is to stay safe and wash your hands, and hope this is over pretty soon. Looks like we have Josh joining us now. Josh, is that you? You are here. Excellent. Hello, hello.
I am here.
Lovely.
Nice to see you, Jared.
Good to see you too, man. Yeah, it's really lovely to have you on the show. This is actually our 5th episode, so
Great.
We've had a chance to work out some kinks, and this is my first time sort of unveiling a new sort of look where we have your name actually on display, which is pretty fun.
Sweet.
So hello, if you want to say hi to everybody who's watching, and maybe explain a little bit about what you do and what Transcend's all about.
Sure. My name's Josh Hockin. I'm from Edmonton, Alberta, and I'm the director of coffee for Transcend Coffee, we're a small roaster and retailer here based entirely in Edmonton. We've got a couple of shops, and the majority of my job is related to sourcing coffee. So I'm the guy who travels to the coffee producing countries and works with the exporters and the farmers and the millers and all that stuff on making sure that the coffee that we bring in is really high quality, is very transparently sourced, and also ethically sourced.
And it is all of the above. Yeah, I'm a huge coffee enthusiast myself, and every time I have selections from Transcend, I am just blown away. Like at your consistency, and your ability to have that not only bring in some really nice tasting selections, but I feel like you guys stay innovative. You are very transparent. You're really bring a lot to the table when it comes to talking about just not only where you've sourced your beans, but the process that goes into making them a quality product and sharing that with your customers. And yeah, I find that super inspiring. You guys are we look up to you. We really do.
Thanks. I really appreciate you saying that. I think that Transcend and JagaSilk have a lot in common.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Well, I think that that sourcing ethic and the direct to farm, and I think putting a lot of perhaps resources into building quality relationships with growers and then sharing that with the customer base, I think is important to us both for sure. Hey.
Absolutely. You obviously don't want to be preaching at people, but anyone who wants to have the opportunity to learn more needs to be able to have that.
Yeah. I always find it like, I don't want to be like that person who's just like, hey, like this is important to everybody. I know it's not, and it's not like that's a bad thing, but it's nice if it's just quietly awesome. But for those that do want to have that conversation, it's really nice to have the data to be able to have it, right? So
absolutely. Yeah. And the whole idea is that just because a customer might not be interested or be like, have the time or the exposure to understand all that stuff behind it, that's not an excuse not to do it.
Right. Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
The reason we do business the way that we do is we think it's more sustainable. We think it's more equitable. And even if we never marketed about it or anything like that, that's still how we would do it.
100%. And likewise. Yeah. And from day one, I think when we started doing tea at JagaSilk anyway, I think that I was always inspired by, movements in the wine industry and how transparent they have been, and conversations about, soil structure and varietals or cultivars, etc. That geeky stuff I find so fascinating and interesting, and I don't necessarily, like you said, I don't want to preach or anything, but it's so awesome when I can see that in different products, right? And it's something that I find really attractive. I'm like, oh, cool, this cheese, like, it has the longitude and latitude coordinates on it, rad.
It's like what, and then being able to like tie that information to like there's a reason for it.
Yeah,
I think that's how you build that bridge to any sort of consumer. Is
totally.
I had a long conversation with a customer in our cafe on Tuesday,
right,
just about what elevation does for coffee.
Interesting.
And
okay.
He was just really interested in it, and it was really cool.
What does elevation do for coffee, Josh?
Sure. Higher elevations correlate very strongly to lower average temperatures.
Okay.
And the lower temperatures mean that the same coffee tree that was grown on a lower elevation would actually mature like more slowly at the higher elevation.
Right.
Right. So, and that more slow maturation actually causes more of a buildup of all the respiratory intermediate products inside the fruit and the seeds become more dense. And the more dense they are, the more organic acids and flavor complexity potential exists inside the bean.
Right. Makes so much sense. This is why we get really excited when we're drinking. Like right now, before you came on the show, I was brewing a really nice first flush Darjeeling from the Gadapahar estate, and I'm always impressed with the sophisticated, complex flavors they're able to achieve in Darjeeling. And of course, it's in the Himalayas, and the Himalayas, we're talking high elevation, some of the highest elevations in the world. And it's interesting because if you get a selection from Nepal is actually located a little bit higher than Darjeeling in the Himalayas, and it actually produces its leaves for the first harvest during the time when you would harvest second flushes in Darjeeling. So when you're drinking second flush Nepalese teas, you're actually drinking their first flush. They're just lying to you and calling it a second flush so that it can sell with the second flush Darjeelings. Otherwise, people think that Nepal is producing this like they're late in the game kind of thing. In Darjeeling, it's all about like the first. But the reality is, it's like you're saying with this slow development of organic acids and volatile oils and all these different flavor compounds. It's true with tea as well. Of course, it's true with everything, like high elevation wines, etc. But when you have that slow growth, like in Nepal, the leaves only get like the trees are like that big, like they're like super tiny.
Yep.
And by having that really like that struggle to grow, it sounds horrible, but it's actually it does so much for the flavor. And when we're talking matcha, for example, the shade growing, a similar idea. It's mimicking that effect of like the difficulty growing by shading the leaves, and it actually draws out so much more strength of flavor and interesting, even medicinal impacts that perhaps would not be, well, that we know that would not be there if we weren't shading them. So yeah, elevation, shade, even non-irrigated olive oil versus irrigated olive oil, that idea of making it so that the plant doesn't, you don't want to kill a plant, you don't want it to be like to the point where it's like dwarfed and in misery and all that stuff. But if you can take care of it but not let it go like to this place where it's overperforming, then I think you get a lot more out of it at the end of the day. You know what I'm saying?
Totally with you.
Yeah, sorry, I just kind of talked on a
no, it makes perfect sense to me.
Awesome. It looks like my other guest has arrived.
Great.
Sherri Anne from Sister Speak is here. So thank you for joining us, Sherri Anne. Sherri Anne, meet Josh Hockin. Josh Hockin was just introducing.
Hi, Josh.
Nice to meet you.
Josh
Nice
is
to meet you.
the director of coffee over at Transcend in Edmonton. They're one of our older customers. We've been working with you guys for what, 6 years now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was
Since 2013, I thought. So
oh, really?
maybe
okay.
almost 7.
Oh,
yeah.
wow. Okay. So I remember the first time visiting you guys in 2015, like in person, because we started things sort of over the basically a teleconference, I believe. Like you guys sampled teas kind of like this, hey? Like I sent you tea and you were drinking it and we were asking questions and I remember being really excited when I got to go see you guys, and you guys were just so good to Mew and I. Michael drove us around the city, and we had different foods and drank your coffee and saw your spaces. And then to see you develop over the years has been really fascinating too. Opening and closing, unfortunately, some shops, but just making some really good decisions on where you guys are best positioned. And again, seeing. What is can you tell us a little bit about, it's not a new space, but your space that you're in, where your roastery moved?
So that's a little bit older, actually. So we opened up in 2017 in a new development, small building in the Ritchie neighborhood of Edmonton. It's called the Ritchie Market, and we're here with a phenomenal restaurant called Bira, a sour and wild ferment brewery called Blind Enthusiasm, and a butcher shop and a bake shop. And we had been roasting here for a little while, and then we found that it just wasn't, we grew enough that it made no sense to actually roast there, and the workflows made no sense. So we actually moved our roastery a few blocks down the road.
Okay, so I'm obviously, I'm not in the know. That's awesome. Okay.
No, that's okay.
So 2017, basically a million years ago, it probably feels like. You were.
Oh, sure does.
Yeah, and then now you have a space down the road where you're roasting. Okay, I actually, I seem to remember having an address change where we needed to send our teas at some point. What?
I believe that's true. Yeah.
When did you open up the roastery, the new roastery?
We did this in March of 2018.
Okay. Cool. Awesome. Sherri Anne, do you want to tell Josh a little bit about what you guys are up to at Sister Speak?
Yeah. So it's anything from solo to band. I play music, and I tour. When there isn't COVID, I tour a lot, and I drink a lot of Jaga Silk tea when I'm home and when I tour.
Yeah, we've been tea sponsors of Sister Speak now for, I guess, around the same amount of time that we've been supplying Transcend. And there is a little bit
that's great.
of nepotism happening here, in that she is my sister, Sherri Anne, and we've been really happy to be her tea sponsor while she's been touring the world. And it was interesting to go to Germany and watch a show of hers in Cologne, and to see the Jaga Silk logo on the poster outside of the cafe.
Oh, that's so cool.
So it was good times. It was good times. Cool. Before we get to brewing tea, I just wanted, Josh, if you could tell our viewers a little bit about what Transcend has been doing amidst this, the elephant in the room here, the COVID-19 crisis, and talk a little bit about how you guys are facing those challenges.
Yeah, so we've converted both of our cafes to takeout service only. One of them, which is a standalone cafe near the University of Alberta, has been pretty easy to manage because it's obviously much slower now. Students aren't around in the same force that they were before. It's our own space, so we can control it really well. It's not as busy. But this market space, us and the butcher shop are the only places that are still open. But there's an open common area in the middle, and it's easy for people to congregate.
Wow.
If we're not careful. So thankfully, there's a facilities manager that manages the flow inside and outside of the building. We obviously are serving everything to go. People can bring personal cups, but we'll just pour the ingredients into their cups for them without touching them.
Okay.
We've tried to transition as many customers coming into the cafe into using online ordering, so you can order drinks ahead of time online, and it gets put into our POS, and we can make them for you. So all you have to do is walk in, pick up, and walk out.
Yeah, we're
and we have
exploring
a little
moving
area
that
for
to ourselves maybe in the coming months. It does make things a lot easier, doesn't it? When you don't have to even deal with the waiting to pay, right? It's just you basically go in the pickup line rather than having to go in the order line and then the pickup line.
Get in, get out, touch as few things as possible. We're not accepting cash at the moment.
You're right.
Just so that people don't have to touch their. There's no exchange that way.
Mm-hmm.
We've put a big sale on the coffee makers that we're the national distributor of. We're the Techniform Mocha Master distributor.
I got one for my mother 3 years ago, and she is the most awesomest coffee maker like ever, and
it's so good, right?
It's amazing.
We've had that on sale since like end of March to now, and
cool.
we've been selling coffee online since 2006.
Yes.
So it wasn't a massive change to just get an influx of orders. We have pretty comprehensive subscription offerings. And we're just encouraging people to make coffee at home, which we've always been huge proponents of.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, around March 18th, we kind of decided to shut things down for dealing with the public, and so for our we've always had an online store as well, but it's been a very small percentage of what we do. I would say maybe 5% of our total, and really the majority of what we do has always been, I'd say close to 80% has been wholesale. So for us, it's been a really interesting challenge with everybody really needing to go into hibernation essentially, so that we can get through this, and we can put that flatten the curve, right? We really need to be in a place where we're not overwhelming the medical system, and we can deal with this crisis accordingly. But yeah, for us, it's been interesting to just hear these stories of different spaces and what they're doing. We have some local kind of success stories, I guess you could say, and if that's not an improper thing to say, well, we're all facing this, basically World War III together against an invisible enemy, as they have been phrasing it in the news. But I don't know. There was like Folepi down the road and hide and seek they have like they've set up lineups where they mark off how far you need to stay apart, and then they have a pickup line and order line, and everything is very carefully regulated. I've seen really good use of plastic shields and like trying to make it so that the air transmission isn't happening. And word is that there might be some movement towards reopening some of BC in May. I don't know if that's moving too quickly or not, but it seems like it's around the corner, and I think it's great for our viewers to hear what you guys are doing. So and what some of our other people we've talked to have done.
I know that like in Alberta, the majority of our cases are actually traced to a couple of meat packing plants in the south of the province.
Okay.
Edmonton itself, so our city has very few cases. We've only got 490 confirmed cases or so.
Right. Okay.
And so we're doing okay. Edmonton's not quite like other cities in that we are a very spread out city, very sparse.
Right.
We're like a 20th century city in like the worst, I don't want to say the worst way, but in the most like car-centric cold climate way.
I really enjoyed my visit. Everybody told me I would hate Edmonton. Hey, I really liked it. I thought it was, maybe I got some good weather and I missed all of the ice and snow, and I don't know.
The summertime is amazing. It's a wonderful
I
place.
went in February. The first visit
Woo!
was in
Oh
February.
man,
So.
you lucked out hard.
Okay, all right. I think Michael
I've
was saying
always-
that. We were able to eat outside. He's like, this is not normal.
I've always wanted to go skating on the. Is there like a area you can go skating instead of hiking in the winter?
Oh, there are all
Like-
kinds of areas to skate. Like
pathways.
we have these pilot programs which they're calling iceways or something like that.
Yeah.
And they're just like within parks between other skating rinks, but you can skate between rinks instead of walking or
Sounds-
whatever.
So fun! I want to do that. It's like a life mission.
There was like an architectural student or like a planning student's master's thesis was on developing this concept for like commuting in Edmonton in the wintertime.
Wow.
Which would be really cool.
I was born there.
Hey, all right.
Yeah, she was.
Edmonton.
I was born in Nelson, and whenever I tell people that, they're like, "Yeah, it all makes sense." And I was only there till I was 2, so I don't know.
Huge imprint obviously on you.
Apparently.
I was in.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I spent my first birthday in a moving truck, so I was only in Edmonton for 1 year.
Yeah, that's straight. I actually remember that.
It's probably way different from the way that you don't remember it.
Yep. Wow. Okay, let's flip that around. Okay, guys. While we're talking, why don't we get to making some of this Xiang?
Woohoo!
Sweet. Which one do you want to make first?
I want to do the. Ideally, I would make these at the same time if you guys have the ability to do so.
Yes.
Can do. I just need to adjust the temperature, right? Because one's 94 degrees, one's 90.
They should both be 90. If I put 94 on one, that's an error.
Oh no, wait, that was just me misreading it. It's all good. They're both 90.
They're both 90.
We're
Excellent.
golden.
I know that we have 2 different times. One is going to require you to do a 30-second brew, and one is going to require a 1-minute brew. So I would suggest we start with the 1-minute brew, and then we go to the 30-second brew so that they're done around the same time. If that makes sense?
Yep, perfect.
Lovely. Okay, so just for our viewers, you want to, when you're brewing tea, it's good to have yourself a teapot and a decanter. The reason why we decant is so that we have evenly strengthed tea between cups if you were sharing. If you're not sharing, though, you can totally just decant right into your cup, and that's fine. But try to make sure that you're drinking the tea after it's completely, after you've drained the teapot completely. When we're brewing, both of these are going to require what's called a rinse, guys. So what that means is that you don't need to necessarily preheat the teapot like you normally would have to, because you're going to put the hot water onto the leaves and you're going to let it sit there for like 3 seconds, and then you're going to dump out the water. You're not going to drink that first 3 second steep. That 3 second steep is essentially a rinse. Okay?
Gotcha.
Okay.
So, and you'll love this, Josh. I found out how to use AeroPress funnels. Look at that.
Nice.
Right? Like, who uses them for their AeroPress? I know very few people that do. But for your teapot, yeah, this is the way to do it. Okay, so I'm going to put, both of them require a 6-gram dose.
Okay. Ooh. That was a...
Both of them are 180 grams of water. You got your temperature variable kettle set to 90 degrees C, Shar?
Yeah, I don't have that one today.
Okay.
I have the...
What do you got going on today?
I just boiled the water, so I'm going to do a vessel transfer today.
Okay, so 90 degrees is pretty easy. I mean, in the beginning, when you're doing your, in the beginning when you're doing your pre-rinse, you can just jump it like right on the tea, and you can toss it out. But okay, so where are you at in your process there, Josh? You ready to rinse? Are you already ahead of the game?
Oh, I'm on the brewing, man.
You're like so far ahead. All right, awesome.
I just rinsed.
You just rinsed? Okay. You guys are all ahead of me, so I gotta I gotta speed up my game here. Okay.
Should I rinse them both?
Yeah, you should rinse them both. So I'm on my rinse right now. Your rinse should be no longer than 5 seconds. You just want to wet the leaves, and then you want to empty it out. And then for you, Sherri Anne, if you want to use your decanter or your cup as your cooling device, that would be awesome. Once you guys have wet the leaves, it's a good opportunity to smell and compare the wet fragrance of both of the teas. Josh, since you're so far ahead of the game, why don't you just smell the teapots once you're done draining, and we can just discuss a little bit about what we're tasting there.
Sure thing.
Or what we're smelling for the wet fragrance.
Yeah, I'm just draining out the 2 things now.
Awesome.
Oh, it's 6 grams.
6 grams, that's right.
I accidentally did 7 on the first one.
You can adjust by doing an extra 30 grams of water if you want.
Okay.
It's 1 gram per 30 mils.
Okay.
And it's just the gram to milliliter ratio is something you can adjust to suit. Some people, when they're brewing tea, they for some reason they believe that there's a vacuum of flavor that can be filled by just brewing longer, but you just end up extracting flavors that you perhaps weren't intending to extract. And so things can get pretty weird pretty fast, where you get like this really kind of, acidic or tannic extraction as a result. So what do you smell in there, Josh?
So I've got the dark roast in this guy right here, and it smells. It actually, they're 2 very, very, very different smells. This guy smells.
Yeah.
The dark roast smells a little bit like marijuana.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought the same thing.
Okay. That's funny. I didn't put that on the tasting notes, by the way. Even though it would be legal, right?
Wow, it completely does.
Okay.
Yeah, it's quite funny.
That's
It
hilarious.
must be like some terpenes or something. But
terpenes.
the charcoal roast is, so like, I guess the name charcoal to me implied that it would be quite dark and quite carbony. This is very green, like very fruity, very like this smells more like a classic oolong tea to me.
The dark one.
Although and neither of these smell like duck manure to me.
No. And to put that in perspective there, Sherri Anne, Yashi Xiang translates as duck shit aroma. So, I think I've just made our show not for children. I'll have to click that on the YouTube. But essentially, the story goes that a farmer who came up with this cultivar decided that it tasted way too good, and essentially he was afraid that his neighbors would steal the tea, so he called it duck shit aroma because he wanted to prevent them from stealing his tea so he could have it to himself. That's what the legend says. This particular selection is from a farmer named Eric Chen. His Chinese name, he hasn't actually told me. He's a 30-year-old farmer who took over for his family. And he basically has become pretty innovative since he took over. He's been doing things like this, where he took the exact same batch, Josh, and one batch was roasted at 95 degrees centigrade for 8 hours. Oh, but now it's not like in a drum roaster. This is like a charcoal roast. This is open, right? Like this isn't like when we think 100 degrees, for example. The other one is 100 degrees for 15 hours. That sounds pretty crazy. Like you would just be left with pure charcoal, right? Like there'd be nothing there. But because of the way that it's roasted, that isn't really, that's not what's going on. So this, when he sent it to me, he was like, this dark roast is how he would normally roast for export, whereas this lighter roast is what he would normally do for roasting for domestic consumption.
Oh,
Very interesting.
Isn't it?
Very interesting.
So he was curious what I thought, and I'm curious what you think before I tell you what I think. Do you have a preference?
Sure. I don't have a preference. I guess this is sort of what happens when you're tasting for a living. You just you can appreciate lots of different stuff. I will say that I do like the dark roast more than I thought I would.
Okay. Yeah. I think because of how dark roasts are discussed in coffee, it's often just a sign of something that perhaps has been taken in a direction where there's no identity left to taste, right? You don't really get origin flavors. You just get a masked flavor.
Yeah, there's really no variety left. There's no origin left. There's no process left.
Yeah. So
It's all roast.
It's all roast, right? Which, if that's what you're going for, kudos to you, right? Like, it's not like a judgment at all. It's just if you're trying to taste for unique identity, it becomes almost impossible to do so, right? So that's, I think, where things get, So this is...
Yeah, I don't think that dark roast is a bad thing necessarily. It's just, it's a different style.
What are you tasting here, Sherri Anne?
I didn't actually brew mine yet.
Oh, you didn't? Okay.
No.
So you're going to pour your boiling water into the cup first to cool it after it's gone to a fresh boil. If it's been sitting there for a while, then don't do that. And you're going to put you're going to put a little less than 180 grams on the leaves because you've already there's a little bit of water absorption, so I put more like 170. From the rinse, right? If you kept your scale going the whole time, you could go to 180. Like if you're showing like a number that's greater than 0.
Yeah.
Then you could take it to 180. Because then
so what should I take it to if I just tart it?
170.
Oh, okay. Sorry,
you got that on your end too. Hey, Josh, is being careful with making room for the water absorption in the leaf before you go to the 180?
You bet.
Awesome. Cool. All right.
Do you have a timer by chance?
A timer? Oh, you're going. Okay. You're awesome. Okay. So which one are you doing?
The 1 minute first.
Okay. I'll start at 45 seconds and I'll let you know when we're there.
Thank you.
What are you smelling in the cup and the wet fragrance of the leaf there, Sherri Anne?
This one is the light roast and it smells like it smells just here. I'm gonna do the other one too right now for 30 seconds.
Sure, we're actually at 30 seconds on the timer, so they'll both be ready at the same time. So you got to be like super
perfect. I gotta steep them both at the same time somehow. I have a method.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, so this one, oh, it smells really nice. It's like kind of mellow.
Okay.
A little bit of the grass, but
Okay, you're done.
It's time.
It's time.
Dark roast out. Oh shoot! Put it in the wrong thing. This is hard at once.
Yeah, go fast. Do it. You can do it.
I can't do it at the same time. My cup's too small.
Awesome. What are we tasting over there, Josh?
All right, so I find that the dark roast has more of a flavor profile that you would get from a typical crimson tea.
Okay.
I actually do get tea notes, which is hilarious to say, but slightly floral. I get like a little I get a little bit of apricot. I get some like honeycomb kind of qualities, a little bit of malted type flavor, ever so slightly.
I find that the strength of flavor in the dark roast is a lot like there's a bolder expression happening there, whereas I find that the lighter one is got more like a grassiness to it, or like but there's like this really nice sort of soft, like if you cooked sugar lightly, where you get like that almost butterscotch kind of flavor happening.
Yeah. I find it a bit grassier, a bit fruitier. I get the aromas that you would get from like a a sliced pear.
Right. Right.
I really enjoying this
It's interesting.
charcoal roast.
I find that yeah, like this is Phoenix Mountain. So Phoenix Mountain, this is essentially when they say here's a tea, this is what they're talking about. Like to them, there is no other way of having tea. It's charcoal roasted. It's a darkly withered oolong. It's just how you produce tea. It's like in Japan when they say like here's a tea, they're referring to sencha. Like that's just what they would be saying. Yeah, it's interesting though that there's such a variance of flavor possible through that charcoal roasting process. And when we were in Hoshinomura and we were at in Japan and we were staying at the hot spring and they had a beautiful sencha that they served us. I remember being really impressed by it. And then I went to the farmer that we were working with at the still work with, Mr. Takaki. And one of his staff was like, "Oh, what tea did you have at the hot spring?" Because I was telling him about it. I'm like, "Oh, it was this really nice sencha." I told him the name of the company, and he was like, "Oh yeah, that company roasts way too dark, so you can't really taste any individual flavor." And I thought it was so funny because of the parallels. And then when I talked to Mr. Chen about these too, he's like, "Yeah, we roast it that way for export, but you can't really taste the cultivar or really what's going on." And I'm like, "Really? Okay, that's interesting to me because like I feel like I can." And I'm not really like I'm definitely I am not the expert here. Like I feel way more at home. Even with Japanese teas, we've only been drinking them for like 16 years. For people that have been drinking it for like decades or like 4 or 5 decades, they're like wow, like you guys, you got it going on in terms of tasting all the subtlety of flavor. But I don't know. Like I feel like I can taste the difference here between like a Bashan that we just got in, or like Chilan or a Milan Shang that we had earlier. Like I feel like the cultivar does come through even with this darker roast. So maybe what they're talking about is just it's magnified when you don't roast it that deep. Those flavor differentiations. You know what I mean? Maybe that's what
I think that makes sense.
Yeah, and I found that like when I first drank it, I was really wowed, honestly, by the deeper roast. I just thought it was really striking. But then
I feel the same.
But then as I kept drinking it and I kept coming back to it, I found that the one that I started to crave was the lighter roast. I was kind of surprised. I was like, well, I was surprised that I liked the dark roast better in the beginning, and then I was surprised that I was kind of drawn towards the lighter roast over time. Maybe I shouldn't have been.
I oversteeped my lighter roast.
Okay, so you're feeling some pretty intense bitters on your tongue?
Yeah, and then the dark roast was like it feels perfect. Okay. It tastes
Why don't
amazing.
you post dilute a little bit for your light roast?
So I took that sample of water that you had sent us.
Yeah.
I analyzed it.
Okay.
Just using some titration kits to see what the hardness levels and the alkalinity levels were, and then I rebuilt some in my lab, and it's so different. Like whenever I brew tea using Edmonton water, it comes out quite tannic. Like no matter what you do, it's just tannic. It's just, but with this, with very low TDS, very low alkalinity, both of these had just like excellent mouthfeels, very, very, very smooth. Like
so interesting.
Very, very low tannin, like almost none.
Can you tell our viewers a little bit, and Sherri Anne, about what you mean by remanufacturing the water? And so you're essentially using a test kit that you could use for aquarium water that anybody could get, right? Like to test
absolutely
the total dissolved solids in the water and the acidity, etc.
Yeah. So I test for the total hardness in the water. So that's like the number of dissolved cations in the water. So we're talking like magnesium, calcium. I think those are the cations. Maybe I'm wrong.
Okay.
Anyway, it's the positively charged ions.
Okay.
Calcium, magnesium, that sort of stuff. Potassium, and then you want to know how many of those are in there, like what the molar strength is. Mm-hmm. So you know essentially what these are the things that pull flavor out of coffee and tea and stuff like that. So that's right. The more of that you have, the more stuff you're going to get out of it.
Makes sense.
And then when you have when I'm talking about alkalinity, I'm talking about the amount of pH buffering that can happen in the water. So if you have a lot of alkalinity like we do in Edmonton, because all of our water comes from rivers that have been fed from glaciers that have passed over, thousands of kilometers of limestone, and they pick up that limestone and it turns into bicarbonate in the river, and that bicarbonate doesn't get filtered out in water treatment because it's not a bad thing, but it can take acidic compounds that are in what you're trying to brew and buffer them out and negate them, and so it can turn it into kind of like a dull, flat, chalky flavor profile.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So
it can
by
dull
reducing
things.
Totally, and so by reducing that amount in the water that I used here, I was able to keep those brighter, fruitier things and not veer into tannic.
Interesting. Okay. So I mean, I'm always interested in how my tea tastes at my customers' shops, and I've never really been able to figure out the process for how to do that. And I once visited the tea purchaser at Intelligentsia in Chicago, Doug Pallas there, and I just remember being wowed by this fancy machine that he had that he could put in the water sample of, say, he wanted to taste what the tea tasted like to the farmer, so he would ask the farmers to send him water samples so that he could taste what they're tasting.
Wow.
And I thought that's so cool. And he would also get his wholesale customers, say in the West Coast, to send him water samples so he could dial in their tea for them from his space in Chicago without actually having to go there. He could see what their water was like, and that was so cool. What an amazing service, right? So I was always wowed by that. But I thought that this machine would be this like a crazy expensive investment, and yet you managed to. So when you remanufacture the water, you analyze what the total dissolved solids are in there, the alkalinity, and then when you want to manufacture it, what do? You add some sodium bicarbonate or because you can't take away. So I guess you're going to dilute with distilled water, or like what?
Or I just start with distilled water.
Of course, yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
So it's never going to be a 100% recreation, but we're taking what we think are the two most important qualities of the water, and approximating that. So I have two concentrates that I've built. One is built with Epsom salts.
Okay.
And one is built with baking soda.
Oh.
Okay. What is the difference?
Well, the Epsom salts provide the magnesium.
Right.
Okay. And the baking soda provides the bicarbonate.
And you just cut them together to get like sort of a
I have two concentrates, and so the one of known concentration.
Yeah.
And then I just have a spreadsheet that I put the numbers into, and then if I want to make a liter of water of a certain quality, I just put in those two weights the two required weights of the concentrates, and then top up to 1,000 grams of distilled water.
It totally makes sense. Yeah, that's it's like when we're doing food safe and we want to figure out the concentration of, say, iodine or viper or bleach so that we can make sure that we're sanitizing at the proper amounts. We do this kind of measurement in food service all the time. And I guess it's applying that working knowledge to manufacturing water in a simple way, and borrowing the power of Epsom salts and sodium bicarbonate at extreme dilution. So we're not really, it's not like it's salty or it's chalky. We're getting.
Oh, it's crazy! It's so dilute.
Yeah. So like there's
we're trying to approximate your drinking water, right?
Yeah.
Your drinking water in Victoria.
Right, which is
your drinking water is not salty, and your drinking water is not.
Exactly. So just for our viewers' information, that dilution is just going to make it to the point where you don't even notice it's there. It's just on such a subtle level. It's just about how the molecules in the water bind to the flavor compounds in the tea extraction, so that you can then have it roll over your tongue, and it basically defines what you taste, or it helps you to access flavor compounds that you might not otherwise be able to access, I guess is a way of describing what's going on.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know if I'm being technically incorrect, but
I think you're explaining it really well.
Okay, awesome. Cool. All right.
I will note.
Yeah,
sorry. I just wanted to say one thing about the water. Like, when I'm traveling for music, it really makes a difference how tea tastes where I'm traveling, and it's incredible the difference. Like San Diego, I don't know anybody that drinks the tap water straight out of the tap there, but one time I did make tea, and they not only have a lot of, they have some minerals, but they also have added things like, I think there's like lye, like chalk kind of things to alkalize the water after they clean it out. And that was not a good cup of tea. But most people drink the bottled water from the machines in California. So I have a question. If when I get the water filled, I'm not there now. I'm in British Columbia now. But in California, when I get the water from the machines, it's reverse osmosis, so it almost has nothing in it.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of people drink, and a lot of are down there. And then I know that some water refill station stores, they sell magnesium salts, and you can put it in the glass jug. So is there anything else that you'd recommend for tea drinkers in places where they're getting their water that's like purely reverse osmosis?
For tea drinkers, like essentially what you're putting in for those magnesium salts, that's exactly what I'm doing, except.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, like that's what Epsom salts are.
Yeah, so you can put them in a little pouch and just like put it in the water in a glass big jug.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I've just used like really low concentrations because I'm trying to mimic the water that Jared has in Victoria, which is really, really like low TDS.
I'm curious what
Gotcha.
your measurement was for the water that I sent you, because I mean, I wouldn't say that it's like water in Victoria is what you drank. It is, but it's also the water from the taps at JagaSilk. So there's going to be a role that's played there for sure, because we have a quadruple filter, but there's going to be things that aren't going to be filtered out, and that's what I think you're talking about, right? So you're probably
so you're not going to.
It's not like tap water from. Yeah, just to clarify with everybody that
you'd be surprised.
Yeah, that's important to have filters in JagaSilk. Yeah.
Yeah, you'd be surprised what doesn't get filtered out. Fair. Using those things, right? Okay. Like, I mean, and they're going to take care of anything that's going to give you an off taste. They're going to take care of anything that's going to give you a like any silt or anything like that for sure.
Yeah.
But they're not going to impact quite as much as you might think the hardness and the alkalinity. In fact, they're not going to touch the alkalinity really.
Interesting. Because I have a quadruple filter, and 3 of them are just kind of varying sizes of carbon filters. And I put in the 4th filter because it got to the point where it wasn't extracting flavor. So there's now like some mineral filter in there that the water goes through to bring in some more, I guess.
Okay, really cool.
So that helps me to like reduce it down.
So you're
and then
a little bit remineralized. Gotcha.
Yeah. So I figured that might be important to bring up as we're talking about this. And while we're talking, let's brew this second steep if we can multitask.
Okay.
Oh sure. Yeah.
Woo, might be tough.
Are we doing the same amount of time?
For the second steep, we add 30 seconds each time on the dark roast and on the.
Okay.
What I found is that that one that's 1 minute, the light roast, I find that if I take it to a minute and a half, it's a little bit too much, even though that's what it says on the instructions. Sorry to our viewers. What we found is that bringing it to a minute and 15 really makes a big difference, rather than a minute and 30 for enjoyability.
Okay.
So a minute and 15.
If my kettle's been sitting for 5 minutes, do you think it's at 90 degrees?
I would reboil just so that you're a little bit more certain.
Okay.
Of what you're drinking. And then you can always cool it by 1 cup, right? And you can get it the 90 degrees that you need.
I've actually been using Vernon tap water and boiling it straight without a filter. And now I'm using Silver Star Mountain filtered spring water.
Okay, so it's going to be a different flavor entirely from what you've been experiencing so far. That's
probably
cool. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, water is a pretty high percentage of tea, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And I think the same conversation when we're talking with coffee drinkers, really with anybody doing like wine is perhaps less. You're getting a lot of that liquid from the fruit itself, but the role that water plays is still going to be there, more in like how they what they're watering the soil with and how that comes into the end fruit. But with coffee and with like botanical extractions, it's pretty critical. The composition of your water. And it doesn't mean that you can't have good water if you don't have, like, say, the water that we have here or the manufactured water that Josh is working with. I don't think Josh would I don't know. I don't want to speak for you here, man, but like, it's not like the tea tastes terrible because it's not made with the Jaga
Oh
Silk
gosh,
water,
no.
right? It's
I just wanted us to be tasting as close together as possible, the same stuff.
which is fun, right? Like
Totally.
And I think that when you're at, like, when I was in England, and I made my toklai. You've had our toklai before, by the Doka estate, and I enjoy that tea. It's a lighter crimson, or it could sort of be in between like the really green flavors you'd get out of something from Darjeeling and the more bassy flavors you could get out of Assam. It's from the Bihar region, but when I made it there, it was horrible. It tasted like tomato soup. I thought something was wrong with the tea. And I thought that I'd used a pan that had cooked pasta sauce in it, because I didn't have a kettle. I was heating up water on the stove, and I was like, this is horrible. And then I made it again, and Mew, she was like, oh, this is terrible too. And we were like looking. We tried to, anyway, we figured it out that it was just really hard water, and if we brewed it way longer, like instead of 3 minutes, we took it to 6 minutes, suddenly we were tasting something closer to what we remembered. So adjusting your brewing parameters for your water is also highly encouraged, because it's sometimes the only way you can get an enjoyable cup out of your tea, right?
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Oh, these colors are nice.
Aren't they? Yeah, a lot deeper, hey?
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
So we once had a lovely visitor come in from the Wuyi mountain region. He's a black matter scientist, and he would fly here from Chicago just to drink tea, which is pretty awesome. And
that's pretty cool.
And he was like super into the Wuyi mountain teas, and there's a lot of similarities between your Phoenix Mountain oolongs and your Wuyi mountain oolongs in this roast profile. Anyways, what he would often say is, like, you really only understand the tea on the third, probably the fourth infusion, because that's when the roast characteristics start to fade away and you get to really taste the quality of the leaf. I thought that was an interesting thing to hear.
Very cool.
Yeah, he's like, there's a lot of cheap tea exported that tastes good on that first infusion, but doesn't really hold up when you go any further than that.
Interesting.
And I think it's noticeable here just how intense the light roast is, comparatively speaking.
Yes.
Yeah, and whereas
the light roast actually is this is phenomenal.
Yeah, right. Like, it blossoms, and the way that you drink tea in this region is it's all about a flavor journey through multiple infusions, right? Isn't that interesting? And just like that bouquet in the nose.
In this second steep, I'm really connected with the lighter roast. The first roast, I was way more connected with the dark roast.
Isn't that interesting? And maybe, but the dark roast actually reminds me of a hojicha. And again, we come from such a Japanese-centric worldview at Jaga Silk. But I feel like that Maillard reaction, that cooking of the sugars is really like it's a really huge part of that flavor profile of that darker roast, that carameled sugar.
Yeah, I definitely taste the sweetness in the lighter roast.
Mm-hmm. What are your...
Yeah, I see exactly what you mean about hojicha. This is those same, like, this is like the butterscotchy, caramely quality that I love in hojicha, like in the dark roast. But this is now turned into a really like floral, like the light roast, a floral, grassy, fruity, complex thing. It's big. I love it.
Nice. Yeah, and drain your cup there, Josh and Sherri Anne, and smell the cup when you're done, especially on that light roast, and just smell that.
Is it okay if I might not be able to drink both?
Yeah,
all of them.
Oh, totally. No, like,
because I'll get too wired.
know your limit and play within it, right?
I'm actually making ice. I'm drinking half of it each time and making iced tea with the rest.
That's a good move. Yeah, no, that's a good move. And you can always like really
Wow.
when you're drinking these teas again at Origin, just to give you a sense of what's a little bit more common, is you're seeing people brew
Wow.
in teapots that are, I don't know if you can tell the size here, but like that's my fist, and that's the teapot, right?
That's what I got here.
Right.
No, actually, I'm brewing in these.
So, and that's
I
like
got this little guy.
that's like that barely holds 3 ounces. So, if you compare that to the one that me and Josh are using, side by side,
Yeah.
right?
This,
It's like
this guy holds 6 ounces at the top.
that's right. So the guy that you're normally brewing with at Origin is 3 ounces or less. And
Wild.
and you'll often choose your teapot to if you look inside. I don't know if you guys can see inside here, but there's a
Wow.
it's unfinished, and it's going to actually impart mineral content to the tea, and so
Right.
you'll have brewers choosing particular teapots for particular styles of tea to bring out optimum flavors. So the clay teapots play a role, I guess, that we can draw parallels to what we're doing with this manufacturing water conversation that we've been having. This theme is that the teapot can play a role if you let it, by choosing like
Yeah.
say Xiang clay or like particular clays that bring out particularly good or bad flavors in a particular tea,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of interesting.
Just the way that the cup, the scent of the cup, the light roast has a very sweet scent to me,
Uh-huh.
and the dark roast a little bit sweeter and still smells a bit like cannabis.
Cannabis, okay. Huh. That kind of skunky smell. But
A little bit. It's like a. But although,
I find it pleasant, right? Like I
well, it's so much. It's actually now it's more sweet,
like,
too.
personally,
Oh.
I don't really enjoy the smell of marijuana.
Me neither.
I do get that herbaceous smell though, it's definitely there in that first infusion, and a little bit. I think it's more subdued, but still there.
It's getting sweeter now, and it's
Yeah.
actually the sweetness is overpowering the kind of like, kind of a smell. Yeah.
It's interesting though, hey, like this is just
Mm.
I find it fascinating that these different flavor compounds, like seriously, up until the moment where they were finishing this process, where like so they did the kill green, they parched it, they did the oxidation, they rolled it, they did more manipulation of the leaves, they rolled it, they put it in oxidation trays. There was like so many steps to get to the point where they're finally charcoal roasting it at the very end, and then that's the only place where they diverged. One was finished doing this charcoal roast 100 degrees centigrade for 15 hours. The other one was 95 degrees centigrade for 8 hours. The fact that that's the only difference, really,
Wow.
it boggles the mind. Like it's so interesting that this is the same batch of tea.
Wow.
You know?
It's just the time that it's been roasted and the temperature.
Yeah.
It's so
Well, that
interesting.
makes sense.
Uh-huh.
I actually can relate now. I'm at first I was all about the dark roast, and now I'm more into the light roast.
You're leaning
Yeah.
towards it, hey? Yeah, because it's just
Not that
there's,
they're both great, and not that they need to be like one or the other.
there's just a
I
lot
like the sweetness.
of character in that in both, really, but like yeah.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? Ian?
They're different characters. They're totally different expressions.
Mhm.
As the dark roast gets a bit cooler,
And we want to give the dark roast some love.
I finally like it's like a malty sweetness that I'm getting. It's very, very.
Ah,
It's definitely sweet. It's definitely like graham crackerish.
Or cooked
that sort of
rice
stuff.
or something like that, hey?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That sort of stuff. Which makes me think of Japanese tea in a lot of ways.
Yeah, like genmaicha or something.
yep.
Whereas the light roast is just the mouth feels so much lighter. The flavor profile feels more like what I would expect a oolong tea to taste like. It's a really nice one. It's really, really, really. It's a very like pleasant grassiness, like very pleasant. There's a lot of sweetness behind it. There are some fruity qualities. It's just and it holds up really well as it cools as well.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, and I was having a discussion with a friend about why a particular coffee I had would taste really good within that sort of 3-week benchmark that we often talk about. But I find that a lot of times I can take my coffees and enjoy them like a lot later, and even though I've sort of broken the rules. But some coffees, that is not the case. Like really noticeably not the case. Like they were really great, and then there was some sort of like flavor cliff that they jumped off of. And I've noticed that with, say, some senchas or some oolongs or even some crimson teas, where like that transition from a really enjoyable tea to one that is so flat and uninteresting, it seems so sudden. It wasn't this slow thing, like this slow transformation. And he was talking a little bit about how that might be due to how the roast occurred, that the slower baking of the coffee beans would actually create more pressure on the scent, like the molecules in the coffee, and it would create an opportunity for that process to unfold with a little bit more severity. Is there any what are your thoughts on that? Why am I tasting this cliff?
That's interesting. So I think in a few cases, when you're talking about slow roasting, the pressure inside tends to decrease because the cellulose walls that make up the molecular structure of the bean itself become more degraded, and so gas can escape through it more easily and more quickly. So usually a darker roast won't last as long.
Right, makes sense.
And that's because of a couple things. Like the CO2 comes out more quickly, and that CO2 sort of acts as a preservative in some ways. Because the cell walls are weaker, oil from the center of the bean, or throughout, that's evenly distributed throughout the bean, can get pushed out to the outside and oxidized.
Right.
That can happen.
But what if it's like the same endpoint? Like say you reach this sort of, I'm going to borrow what's often considered archaic terminology in specialty coffee, but a medium roast, and you get to this place where you hit that same sort of spectrum, I guess, but you got there in with such a different roast curve. One got there at this like hotter temperature for a shorter amount of time. One got there for a lower temperature for a longer amount of time. You reach the same end goal. But there's sometimes, I guess, you can go for way too low, and it take you too long to get to that point, and that also kind of bakiness that comes through. And I guess that's what I'm asking about. It's not necessarily the difference between, like if I take it too far, but more like how I got there and the role that plays.
Gotcha. So the qualities of a baked coffee mean that like a lot of the more interesting acids are roasted out over time. It's not just a temperature thing, it's also a time thing. Like if you think about in roasting, one of the key moments in roasting any coffee is what's called first crack.
Right.
And that's where there's been enough there's a set of reactions that are basically like the fracturing of sucrose that happen around 190 to 200 degrees Celsius, somewhere around in there. And that fracturing of sucrose produces water vapor and carbon dioxide as byproducts, right. Or just as some of the products. And so when you're putting out steam, you're putting out carbon dioxide, you're creating gas pressure inside the bean, and at a certain point, it starts to crack. It'll crack open. It won't get as big as popcorn does, let's say, but it cracks open and gets a bit bigger. And one of the things that coincides that is the production of acetic acid in a roast.
Right. And
all other kinds of acids. So like if you take a small sample of a coffee that's roasting at first crack, it's going to smell quite vinegary.
Interesting.
It's going to smell sharp and like that. So, these acids aren't necessarily a bad thing, but you want to temper that in a way without losing them. You don't want to like stop at first crack. You don't want to like go too far past it if you want to maintain the acids. But if you're baking, it's not like, and burning off those acids or converting those acids is not necessarily a function of temperature at that point, because you're in a certain temperature range already. It's a function of time.
Oh, interesting. So how long you're in that temperature range
Yeah,
is
and
going to
so
play
if
a
you're in
major
it,
role in the development of those flavors.
and if you're in it for a lot longer, like you would in a baked coffee, those sort of like complexifying, if that's even a word, acids are going to be gone.
Right, right. That makes sense.
Yeah, and so that coffee is going to taste flatter quicker.
Interesting.
Oh.
Okay. All right. So that makes sense. Because I've been really interested in just what's possible in a tea
Oh.
using this kind of methodology. And Takaki, one of the Japanese farmers we work with, he's a really amazing roaster, and he. When I say roaster, though, like you wouldn't expect it because a lot of people don't know that Japanese teas are finish fired. So they see them, they're green. They think, oh, if it's roasted, it must be hojicha. But this part of the process of that the tea farmer will play, or in many cases, it's not the tea farmer. It's actually the tea company. So the tea farmer will actually sell to a co-op. The co-op will then sell to a tea company. The company may have like garden in their name, so you would expect them to be growing, but they're not. They're just buying from a cooperative, and then they're blending like smaller estates together, and they're creating a particular profile that they then finish fire. They toast. So they're essentially tea factories in Japan bring the tea to a process called aracha, or raw tea, or rough tea, I guess is a better way of translating it. And then that it's the rough teas that are blended and then separated and then finish fired and then given a poetic title that you're buying when you're visiting Japan. And what we're really interested in at JagaSilk is procuring those ingredients before they've been roasted, etc. And we get to this place where we're tasting things as they are, I guess. I don't want to take away from the magic that the tea companies bring to the equation, but we're just so interested in those farmer relationships, so that's what we end up focusing on. But I'm also interested in, say, somebody like Takaki, who's actually doing what is commonly done by the tea company, and he's finish firing. And when he's
doing his own,
and when he was giving us the finish firing coordinates, it struck me just how many parallels there are to that and specialty coffee roasting. There was this really interesting a focus on a roast curve that he would adjust depending on the cultivar, depending on how much moisture there's left, depending on the season. What was really fascinating is how he would actually change his roast profile for the same batch of tea, depending on whether or not he was releasing it in the late spring, early summer, or if he was releasing it in the fall. Because he said that tea drinkers were looking for different profiles depending on the time of year. I thought that's so cool, like wouldn't it be
really
amazing to have a different roast curve for a particular season, from the same batch, if you could have greens that long, but yeah, it was really cool to see that. And so then the parallel to what we're drinking now, like just looking at how they're, Chen is playing with different profiles is so fascinating. I think we lost Sister Speak.
I think she's gone.
Yeah, I will try and invite her back to the conversation. I know we're about to leave because we're getting quite late. But was there any thing else that you wanted to bring to the conversation before we say goodbye?
I love this sort of like insight into a little bit of like roasting in teaing, in teas, because you don't normally think of tea as being roasted, right? Like you were saying, like even the Japanese green teas are finish fired, which is a type of roasting.
Yeah.
They're green, but but like there is still an impact on the flavor from that, which is really cool. And he's talking about curves.
Yeah.
Like the information that you have on the bag for these Yashi Xiangs are like 95 degrees for 8 hours, 100 degrees for 15 hours. That's like, like an oven recipe, but whereas like in coffee and what these finish farmers do is like you actually see a curve because there are different things that happen at different times, like key points throughout, and you want to manipulate certain points in the roast. It's really cool.
Yeah, and I find that whole conversation about roast curves so fascinating, and that like he has a drum temperature and a botanical temperature. And once the drum hits a certain temperature and the leaf hits a certain temperature, then he actually increases the temperature of the drum at that point. And then as soon as the leaves reach a certain temperature, and it depends on the tea, he'll change the recipe. That's when he finishes the process. So it's
really interesting.
There's these different kind of goal temperatures that he's going for. But yeah, okay, awesome. Really fascinating conversation today about water, about roast profiles. Really appreciate having you on the show today, Josh. I know that I asked for 45 minutes of your time, and here we are at an hour and 15. But
oh, that's no problem at all. This is a lot of fun. Thanks so much for inviting me on.
Yeah, no worries.
Thanks for giving me the chance to taste these two teas with you side by side. That's a lot of fun.
There's a lot more to them. I really encourage you after the show to keep going with them. We go to like 8-9 steeps quite commonly with those teas. I think you're going to taste even more interesting flavor dynamics as you go along that journey. We only had time to really, I'm just a terrible multitasker, I would say, to make two, in an hour and 15 minutes, we only had time to make 2 steeps of tea. But we had, it was really good having you on the show. So thank you very much. And I hope you guys have great success navigating through this COVID-19 crisis, and we're all come out on the other side a little bit stronger, a little bit wiser, and figure it out.
Likewise, I think we're all learning a whole lot about a whole bunch of stuff, and we're taking a lot of time to reset and really examine our priorities.
Awesome. Cool. All right.
I hope you stay healthy, man.
Thank you. You too. And wash your hands all the time.
All the time.
All the time.
Non-stop.
Okay. All right. Okay. You take care. Thank you very much. Bye.
Take care, Jared. Bye.
Okay. So we are. Oh, this isn't working. Where are we? There we go. Okay. Huge appreciation to all of our viewers for sticking with us this long. Looks like we lost Sister Speak at the end there. I tried to invite her back on the show, but couldn't quite get through to her. Maybe some battery issue or something. It was quite a long show today, so appreciate you you hanging in there. These are turning more into sort of a podcast style show, so we'll totally encourage you to just throw on the show while you're doing something else and listen in, and you can hopefully learn some new things about brewing, about roast profiles, about how different businesses are interacting with COVID-19. It's been a joy to have these shows every week. I look forward to them very much. With the tea bar closed, there's not a lot of opportunity to have this kind of direct contact and to see our viewers watching while we're talking. It's quite lovely. It's really nice to have an opportunity to discuss tea with some of our clients and to have Sister speak on the show and offer her perspective, not being in the industry, is always refreshing. And looking forward to having you watch us again next week. For past shows, again, you can check out our YouTube channel. Today we were brewing a Xiang with 2 different roast profiles. That particular set will be available before the end of the day. So if you want to check in tomorrow morning, we should have the product on the website. There's only going to be a few. We only got a little bit of the dark roast. Most of what we did was the light roast. So we'll just have you on. We'll just have you check it out if you would like. There's about maybe 6 to 10 packages that we'll be able to ship where you get both of them. Otherwise, we still have we have about 25, 30 units left of the light roast. So really encourage you to check it out. Next week, 1 p.m., Thursday, our guest is going to be Amy Ferris from White Rabbit Coffee. They're located in Nanaimo. They're a more recent customer of ours, quite creative crew over there, really operating out of Like Ratio. They've taken over an old antique railway station, and they've converted it into something really creative and interesting. And they actually moved to the island from Alberta, so we're kind of hopping around the country. But they're located in Nanaimo. Encourage you to check them out. We're going to be drinking the Kocha Asatsuyu, so we'll be discussing a Japanese crimson tea, which is pretty fun. So if you want to join in on that conversation, I encourage you to check it out. May 11th, we're going to be drinking some Sencha 96 degrees C. So it's a roast that we got to be a part of, a finish fire that we got to be a part of when we were visiting Japan last year. So if you want to be part of a Zoom cupping, I encourage you to go and purchase some. We're going to include a Zoom code with anybody that wants to participate in that. You just buy a pouch and get your gear set up. You don't necessarily have to ask questions. If you don't want to, you can keep your video and your microphone muted, but if you want to be a part of the conversation, you can do so, and we can all drink tea together, May 11th. So yeah, next week we're going to have Amy Ferris, White Rabbit, Kolchasatsiu. Looking forward to making that happen. The following week we'll actually have Canoe Coffee from Kelowna on the show, and we're really looking forward to bringing you more and more of these episodes. So yeah, please subscribe, tell the world about the show, and we look forward to seeing you next week. You take care. Huge appreciation for you watching. If you're watching after the fact, still huge appreciation for you checking us out. Check out www.jagasilk.com/shop if you want to go and grab some teas. That's jagasilk.com, and we're direct source matcha specialists in the tea industry, mostly doing wholesale, but love to interact with our customers who choose to buy from our webpage and who come into our shop here in Victoria, BC. Hope you take care and stay safe.